Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for joining me. I'm going to have Archbishop Chaput on later today. Things worth dying for, thoughts on a life worth living. I have a 5-page outline. That one may go long. That may become the Good Friday show. Salem takes Good Friday off, so I may have to take the Archbishop long and turn it into a Good Friday show, alerting everyone down the line that that's what I might be doing afterwards. But let's start with the news of the morning. You ought to go get Chaput's book. It's spelled Chaput. Charles Chaput is the Archbishop Emeritus of Philadelphia. Things Worth Dying For. It's an amazing read. It'll be a great conversation. That's later in the program as well. But first, the news on the rundown. The boat is afloat. All right, so they launched a probe, according to the Times of Israel, into the megaship's grounding. I know what happened. They ran into the wall. I mean, really. Who did it? The pilot? I don't know. They ran into the wall. The owner of it owes everyone damages. The colossal container ship, doesn't matter who ran it into the wall. It's their container ship. They caused all the havoc. They're responsible. It's now in the Great Bitter Lake, which is how I've described Dwayne's backyard fountain. He's putting in a new backyard fountain, which is the Great Bitter Lake, because he sits back there. I put in this new screen yesterday. I hope you like my new look. And Dwayne is upset that I finally got it done. I got it done the way I wanted it done, so I can look right at the screen and you can see me. How's that look? Is it looking good? If you're watching on YouTube, I changed it all up yesterday, and it's dynamic. Now, if we can make Skype and Zoom work on it, that will be incredible. We'll see. COVID updates. Wall Street Journal reports as COVID-19 vaccinations ramp up, hesitancy wanes. What a surprise. It works, so people are getting it. Now, a couple of people are out there being vaccine deniers and are telling you not to get vaccinated. Do not listen to them. That's nuts. Go get vaccinated. Go out to dinner. You wear your mask into the restaurant so that people don't get all freaked out. Then you take it off. Then they see that you've got white hair and they realize you're vaccinated. And pretty soon, the country will be completely reopened because we're flooding the zone with vaccine everywhere. Pfizer and Moderna is pumping it out by the millions of doses. I look at the Washington Post every morning. They have on their front page how many people have been vaccinated, and it is 95 million as of this morning. So in a nation of 330 million, we're going to be ahead of this, but you've got to knock it off all over the world as well to stop the variants. The danger is just that a variant develops, so you got to kill it in the cradle, and getting vaccinated kills it in the cradle. Do your part. It's a Christian thing to do, by the way. It is any religious believer's thing to do, if you love your fellow man, is to get vaccinated. People opposing it, I don't know their reasons. Some conspiracy theorists are out there that it changes your DNA. That's nuts. It's not very smart. Just get vaccinated. It's like the polio vaccine. I'm sure there were a few extremists in the days of the polio vaccine who said, don't get polio vaccine. And every polio sufferer I have known in my lifetime wishes that they could have had the polio vaccine. Don't be that person who, on their dying breath, which will be belabored because of COVID, you wish you had gotten the vaccine when it was there. Biden and health officials sound alarm as signs of COVID surge proliferate. I'm not too sure that I see the signs of a proliferation, but they've got to say that. The CDC director warns of impending doom. Look, they politicize this. Nobody believes them. They don't want Trump to get the credit for Operation Warp Speed. They want to get the credit for reopening America. It's all because of Operation Warp Speed and the vaccine. So they've got to say it's bad now so they can be better in a month. Blah, blah, blah. Just get the vaccine. We'll all feel better. Meanwhile, world leaders call for a pandemic treaty. Boris Johnson, Emmanuel Macron, and Angela Merkel proposed global accord akin to that was forged after Second World War, a pandemic treaty. Very nice thought, wonderful. The Chinese will lie and they will not go along with it. The Chinese Communist Party are full of communists and they don't care that the rest of the world got sick. They malingered, they lied, they obscured, they did everything to stop the free world from getting the virus and figuring out how to stop it. That's what the Chinese Communist Party is. And unless and until all communist governments are gone, a treaty about pandemics won't work. Won't work. Simply won't work. Now let's get to the major story that snuck out today. I love it when the trial balloons go up. First of all, the Washington Post has a story by Jeff Stein White House dramatically increased tax proposal as it sought to address tensions over the next big spending plan. So remember, they blew through $3 trillion in spending for their buddies, and they didn't pay for it. They just added it to the national debt. And that's inflationary. It drove up short-term rates, and they thought, oh my gosh, this might kill the economy. We've got to put some tax increases if we want to spend more money on our friends. So they're looking at least at $1 trillion in new tax hikes. But then they want $4 trillion in new spending. So they're sitting around the room at the Teddy Roosevelt room or over in the old DOB trying to come up with $4 trillion in new spending to be matched by $3 trillion in tax hikes. Well, where do you get $3 trillion? You can't get it from high income earners if you raise their rates to 55%, they're going to the Grand Caymans, right? The people in Silicon Valley, Jeff Bezos, he's not going to pay that. And there isn't enough money in the millionaires or the 10 millionaires. They got to go after the super wealthy and then they got to go after everybody. That's why Pete Buttigieg suggested a mileage tax. You got to come up with $3 trillion in taxes. You got to hit everybody. You got to find a way to get into everybody's pocket. So they're trying to find $3 trillion in tax increases. That, however, the one thing I never thought they'd do, I didn't think they would tax grandmas at death. All right, so the death tax is politically a nightmare. Everybody hates it. Grandma's lived in the same house for 45 years, and if it's in California or New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut or Florida, it may have gone up from the $250,000 that grandma bought it for in 1974. And the wallpaper is a little bit tacky and the toilet doesn't work, but it sits there within 10 miles of water on a lake or something like that. And it's gone up and it's gone up and it's gone up. And now it's up over $1 million. And the 10 grandkids. So she had 3 or 4 kids. Grandpa died first. That's what usually happens. My grandpa dodged that bullet. The only grandpa I know went longer than grandma. But grandma's been living alone in that house and putting around for a long time. It's now worth, let's say, $1.5 million. And she bought it for $250,000. Now, today, when she dies, it's valued at $1.5 million, and the 10 grandkids get $150,000 each. And that's the way it's been forever. It's called stepped up basis. Now, when I took federal tax at Michigan Law School 1,000 years ago, I barely got through the final exam. It was Gallipoli for me. And Doug Kahn, wherever you are, God bless you. I took it pass-fail, and I know you looked at it and said, oh, so another pass-fail third year, I'm going to pass him. Because I honestly don't know anything about high-level tax law. I'm not a tax lawyer, nor did I stay at a Holiday Inn. I just know accountants. And everybody in America with $1 million of assets or more, or with a house like that, and it's like millions of people, count on stepped-up basis. They don't have to worry about paying taxes when they die because their houses and their assets and their stocks and everything they've saved their whole life are valued as of the day of their death and distributed because they've been taxed over the course of their life. Democrats want to go after that. They want to do away with stepped up basis. They want the value of everything to be what the value of everything is. One burst of inflation, and it will destroy American wealth. It is the nightmare tax, stepped up basis going away. And Democrats are in favor of it. I'm just curious. I'd like to talk to the accountants out there. What's it, and maybe the estate lawyers, 1-800-520-1234. If Democrats get rid of stepped up basis and the death tax comes with $1 million of exemption, which is what they're talking about, they will lower that over the years and they will raise the rate on the taxable income. What will that do to all of your clients? What will that do to America? I think the Democrats are self-destructive to go after stepped up basis, to try and tax grandma at death for what she's actually worth instead of what she paid for it. They don't want the grandkids to get anything. Democrats are going after the grandkids. It's the dumbest political thing I've ever seen. But I'd like to know from accountants. Open up the phone lines, 1-800-520-1234, 1-800-520-1234. What will this mean for America if they do away with stepped up basis at death? Stay tuned. It's the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before, both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop, now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
For 50 or so years, we've really not been teaching what does it mean to be free? What is self-government? What are we don't teach that. And so you drift along and something like this happens and people just sort of go along because Americans are nice. Who do you think is behind this?
Yeah, I've identified a lot of the bad actors. Big tech is up 24 billion, 26 billion, over 100 billion for, the six guys who run big tech. Amazon is up, triple digit billions, since last year. So, and they're all part of something called the COVID-19 Response Project, which started in March of last year to message how terrifying COVID was.
I'm fascinated in a way that there are so few voices like yours that you're still seeing what you've always seen. It's just that everything has shifted.
Yeah, I didn't leave the left left me, as my husband said. Well,
Reagan said,
oh, really? Is he quoting Reagan?
The Democratic Party left me. And I think this has been a drift over the decades, but it's gotten so dramatic that there are many folks like you, traditionally on the left, who are talking about the same things those of us on the conservative side are talking about.
Yes. And thank you, Eric, for noticing. I have been completely consistent in saying the same things ever since I wrote The End of America in 2007, criticizing each president as he arose for overreach when he overreached. I don't think there are that few of us. I think there are that few of us at a national level or in leadership. And I also think a lot of us are stunned.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Studio. Of course, nobody brought up during the press conference that polls show that Americans want voter ID, including black Americans. Yet your party trashes voter ID as voter suppression. Can you please explain how it is that black people want something that you call voter suppression? That didn't come up. Nor did the stunt that Tammy Duckworth and Macy Hirono tried to pull come up. Two Asian American senators, Democrats. A couple days ago, they told Biden that they weren't going to confirm any more new nominees until and unless he appoints an Asian American to a high-level position. Mr. President, what is your reaction to being pressured to put someone in your administration based on skin color, as opposed to performance, as opposed to your comfort level with him or her, as opposed to background? Is this the direction we should be taking America, Mr. President? When you said you wanted a cabinet that looked like America, you're implying that unless the cabinet is racially
Welcome back, America. I'm astonished. Senate Democrats have decided the way to go is to increase the capital gains tax at death on your assets. What in the world do they think Americans are going to think about that? Kent, in Spencer, Iowa. What do you think about it, Kent?
Yes, good morning, Hugh. Thanks. This is a good topic to inform people. I farm in, it's generational type farming. I had great-grandfather, father, and now I've got a son. And I'll just use the farmland part of this, but there's expensive machinery too. When most farmers buy farmland, it's after-tax money that buys that.
Of course.
After-tax money is hard to come by.
Yep.
And then when you raise a crop, you got your crop inputs and you sell it. If there's a profit, that is taxed.
Yep.
Then you also pay property tax on that land every year. So you get taxed, and then there is usually some gain or inflationary type pressure on the purchase price of that farmland.
Because giant agriculture wants to buy it, right? There are lots of buyers for farmland that's good farmland.
Yes, there's buyers.
And we're not making any more of it. It's a limited supply.
And it's, it goes, the farmers are more productive now, and but it's not easy to buy that piece of ground because it's expensive. And the stepped up basis to continue the family farm is very important.
It's the death of the family farm. I'm thinking about grandma's house, but there are a million different things here. If stepped up basis goes away, the family farm is dead.
Yes, I'm sure there's a lot of small businesses the same way that they work all their life, and so this is it's an excellent topic, and we need more people informed on this. So
call Chuck Grassley and tell him to fight to the death. I can't imagine Angus King is going to support this. I think this is coming from the left-wingers. The death tax is the most unpopular tax in history. And the Democrats have decided they're going to gamble on the death tax. Sales taxes are fine. I mean, that's consumption, tax consumption. Taxing savings is just nuts. Hey, Kent, thank you. Let me check the markets. By the way, this is the biggest story of the day, and it's going to spread out through market. I don't know what it's going to do to markets. This is brought to you by Birch Gold. And by the way, this is going to increase the price of gold. Why? Which is down below $1,700. By the way, it's at $1,693. If you want to buy gold, you go to HughGold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747. You know why it's going to? People can hide gold. You can't hide land. You can't hide houses. You can't hide small businesses. People can hide gold. They buy gold and they give it to their children, and they say, don't say anything about it. And that diamonds, jewelries are the same thing. If the government taxes you at death, the way that the Senate Democrats want to do, people are going to buy gold. So that's going to drive the price up, I think, if this comes in, as will inflation. Move some of your assets into gold. Either buy gold directly from Birch Gold via HughGold.com or text my name, Hugh, to 474747, or move a portion of your assets, maybe 10%, maybe a little bit more now if this thing becomes law, maybe 15%, to an IRA or 401k so that you've got some physical metal against the inflation that is coming, because they're going to spend another $4 trillion on top of the $2 trillion based on a 50-50 Senate and House. Boy, that Georgia election, just got to really thank you people in Georgia for giving the Senate to Chuck Schumer, and they're going crazy. They're going crazy. They think that this is the time to raise everybody's taxes. Stepped up basis, unbelievable. Martin in Atlanta. Since I'm talking, what do you think, Martin, about stepped up basis?
I'm totally against it. I had an older half brother who passed away last year. I was one of several family members between cash, portfolio, life insurance. I inherited $270,000, which is not a lot of money. I mean, yes, it really increased my financial ability to do things, but it's not enough to retire on. And to get rid of stepped up basis, that's totally ridiculous.
How much would you have gotten if they'd done stepped up basis? $1 million exemption. So what did he die with? Did he die with $5 million, $4 million?
His estate's not fully settled yet because there were some assets that have no beneficiaries, but his estate was probably worth around $900,000 split amongst three half brothers, two half brothers.
Okay, then Martin, this proposal would not impact you at first, only later. It's only on assets worth more than $1 million. I want to be fair to him. It's crazy, but not that crazy. Stay tuned, America.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state. Has he come out for D.C. as a state? Listen, if we want to do a realignment in this country, I read to you last week or 2 weeks ago where there's a movement in Oregon to join Idaho. Let's go back to the president talking about the border.
It's not like somebody sitting on a hand-hewn table in Guatemala, in somewhere in Mexico or in Guadalupe saying, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have. Give it to a coyote. Have them take our kids across the border into a desert where they don't speak the language. Won't that be fun? Let's go.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
My theory is that the reason the left is pivoting and desperately trying to focus on gun control is that'll be the shiny object that takes all the attention away from the crisis we have along the border. There's no way Democrats can possibly explain this surge by illegals. And yes, I know the mainstream media wants to call them migrants, but they are, after all, illegals. There's no way to explain this other than the Biden administration's invitation to come in. I saw clips last night of candidate Joe Biden saying, we want a couple million people. We want people here. We're America. And now, of course, there's a real catastrophe unfolding. And ground zero seems to be Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare. It's extremely difficult to maintain. And if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So We need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah, bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are. And they are.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The National
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt. I'm talking about Democrats raising the death tax. And they got a lot of fancy words for it, but it's raising the death tax. And they said, don't worry, unless you're a millionaire, it won't matter to you. It's just not true. They are going to try and do away with a concept called stepped-up basis. Stepped-up basis, you have no idea, actually, who you're a beneficiary of. Someone might be leaving you something in their will that you have no idea. It hits everyone who's accumulated more than $1 million of assets over their entire life. They're 80 years, they're 85, they're 90 years. People that you often hear about that, give away millions because they've been living in a one-bedroom apartment and single and they've stowed all their money and give it to the school district or something, or just grandma. You have no idea. Most people don't know what people are worth. And the government's now saying, in the old days, whatever they were worth at the end of their life is what they were allowed to distribute, and the government took some small part of that. States took a little bit. The exemption for the death tax is enormous for the federal government because people hate the death tax, and now the Democrats want to bring the death tax in and raise and recalculate what you are, quote, worth. John in Burbank, California, what do you think about it, John? John on line 3. Hey, John.
Yes. Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Okay. I'm a real estate attorney for 42 years. I do some trust estates. I advise clients who spend their lives building a fair estate and have kids they want to transfer their assets to. The stepped-up basis would immensely destroy and deteriorate the ability. They'd have to sell more than half their assets to transfer any wealth as a bottom line. Capital gains went from 15 to 20 to 28. The estate exemption is going to be reduced if the Democrats get their way. The estate tax is 40%. It's going to probably go up to 50 or 60%. And again, inflation is going to kick in, which just raises prices. It doesn't really increase value. So there's no incentive for people to save and spend their whole life accumulating assets and so forth. They're going to do away with the 1031 delayed exchange. Rent control is killing the state of California on housing, discouraging people and developers. And they got a big housing problem already.
So let me ask you something, John, since you know what you're talking about. If this passes, does everyone put their real estate into trusts? How do they avoid this?
Putting it into a revocable trust doesn't help you. It doesn't prevent any savings on taxes. It doesn't save you from creditors. It's just another form of holding things to avoid probate, going through the process of probate. And again, California tricked people with Prop 19. They're raising property taxes on people. You can't even transfer your personal residence to your children unless they live in it and make it their permanent residence in order to save the state the property tax level. And,
you see, I left the state. I'm a Virginia now. I didn't follow that whole what they did to Prop 13. So you used to be able to give your house to your kids and not have the property tax get hiked. That's no longer there?
It's unless you live in it, make it your primary residence, and and that's the catch. And if you pass anything through your trust, and you should make a specific asset to child 1 or child 2, whoever's going to live there, because if you give it to all your children, then when they deed out, that's a reassessment. And there's a
Okay,
lot
so
of catches
Prop 13's gone. Now let's talk to the country as a whole, because I want them to understand that people, that they have no idea that they're going to be taxed by this, because usually they don't know what they're going to inherit, and polite company doesn't talk about what happens when Granny dies, right? So they have no idea, but the government is swooping in. I mean, stepped up basis, it hasn't changed forever, has it?
No, it's been there, and it's the last sanctuary, if you really want to know, for passing anything along to your children. Otherwise, they inherit the low basis that you bought it for many, many years ago, and then when they sell the asset, they got such a huge tax that they probably don't end up with anything left.
They have to sell it. They have to sell whatever they inherit, and the government will take 70 or 80% of it. Honestly, I can't believe Democrats are proposing this, because
this is a form of wealth redistribution, and that's all I could call it.
What's it do for really rich people? What's it do for really rich people? I mean, really, you know, the 20 million or the $200 million people, what's it do to them?
Well, you know, they got so much money that probably doesn't affect their lifestyle, but the average person who works all their life, who has a little bit of savings and asset accumulation, those are the people who are going to be hurt the most, because when they lower the exemption level from 13.5 million to 1 million or 5 million or whatever it is, it's going to encompass a lot of things, because inflation is kicking up the price on everything, and it's not really increasing value. It's just increasing the tax amount.
So go read the Wall Street Journal. They're going to lower the exemption to $1 million, and they're going to do away with stepped up basis. It is the most massive tax hike I think I've ever heard of proposed.
It's a killer, and it will destroy any type of passage of anything to your children or grandchildren, and they might as well just start all over again from scratch.
I agree. John, thank you. Tammy, Louisville. Hi, Tammy. Hey, are you there? Your phone sounds a little creaky. Yeah, I think you're on a cell phone and you're breaking up on us, Tammy. Up, she went away. 1-800-520-1234. So the Wall Street Journal story I'm referring to begins, progressive Senate Democrats, now I don't know how many there are, suggested that their new tax plan, tax unrealized capital gains at death, should come with a $1 million per person exemption, setting that line 10 times higher than an earlier Obama administration proposal and shielding a larger swath of upper income households. That is a lie. That is advocacy journalism. The Obama era proposal got nowhere because nobody was going to accept the end of stepped up basis. A discussion draft released Monday by Maryland's Senator Chris Van Hollen. Gosh, it's going to kill everyone who lives in Bethesda, everyone who lives near the Beltway. Oh my gosh. Chris Van Hollen is asking to be defeated for re-election. And others marks an attempt to put details on an idea that President Biden endorsed during last year's campaign. Capital gains taxation is likely to spur significant debate in coming months as Democrats look to raise money from high-income households. It's not high-income households. It's not. It's medium-income households that save for 30 and 40 years. It's not high-income households. Oh, boy, this article is just junk. In the Wall Street Journal, it's just junk. Just junk. Currently an individual who purchased $1 million of stock in 1993. That doesn't sound like you. It should be currently an individual who purchased a house for $250,000 in 1975. That is worth $2 million today. Doesn't owe any income taxes on that $750,000 gain if they die today. A rule that encourages people to hold on to appreciated assets. They might owe estate taxes if the total estate tops the exemption of $11 million per person. Under the Van Hollen proposal, the first $1 million of that gain would be free from income, but the remaining $8 million would be considered a capital gain. It is the biggest tax hike in history by a lot, and that's in addition to everything else. Democrats have wanted this for years. They have wanted this for years. But Mitch McConnell said, no way. The short answer is I'd love to do an infrastructure bill. I'm not interested in raising taxes across the board in America. I think that sends our economy in the wrong direction. Guess who drafted this? Bernie Sanders, Elizabeth Warren, Sheldon Whitehouse, and Cory Booker. All right, so the four radical Democrats want everybody's money. They want to penalize everybody who's saved. That comes on top. It's just the most remarkable thing. Democrats are going after raising death taxes. And they may say you can pay the taxes over 15 years. That's just great. 15 years managing an estate with your brothers and sisters. They are morons. One of the Twitter people, stepped up basis is devastating to farmers, also under land pressure from the push to put solar farms on very remarkable land. Farmers are going to just, farmers and small business owners. You own a car wash and you're not in Breaking Bad. All right, so it's your car wash. And it went from being, you paid $250,000 for it when you were 30 years old and you're 75 and you're still running the car wash. And it's worth $2 million. They're going to tax that $1 million for your kids, actually $1.25 million, at some ridiculous rate. And your kids are going to have to sell the car wash. They're not going to run the car wash because they're not. This happened once before, and it is going to be an absolute loser politically. Democrats just want to raise the taxes on grandma. I can write the ads right now. Democrats are trying to take all of your family's money that they've saved and are getting ready to pay for the kids' college education, the grandkids' college education. And if you're out there saying, I haven't got, this doesn't affect me, I don't own anything. You don't know in whose estate you are a beneficiary. You don't know what grandma, unless you are their executor, unless you got a copy of their updated will, you have no idea whether or not this taxes you. So don't let down your guard. Don't say, oh, this has got nothing to do with me. That is absolutely not the case. It changes everything in America. I cannot wait for Hank Adler to write something for townhall.com. I might have to do the interview. That's my podcast with Hank Adler, with whom I wrote the Fair Tax Fantasy. Hank, I see the warning shot. I see the trial balloon, and then Hank analyzes it, and we write something. But he's still asleep out in California in the house that he will no longer be able to give to his children. Because I think, he might have paid $50,000 for it, and it's probably worth $3 million now because it's within 3 miles of the coast. And I know someone out there saying, well, a $3 million house, let's get some of that. That's not the way it works. It will destroy, then the value of the house will crumble. People will start dumping houses. It's the dumbest thing I've seen Democrats do in a long, long time. I knew they would try and raise taxes, but via a vast expansion of the death tax, I did not think they were that stupid. You vote for Democrats, you vote for the confiscation of your hard work. As it is, you're already paying high tax. In California, you're paying 50% of whatever you make. If you're working hard, they're already taking your money. And people are leaving California. Ditto New York City. That's why people are going to Florida. But you voted for them. There's a consequence. Oh, geez. More on that. 1-800-520-1234. Time for relieffactor.com. There's my little package. It's a long day today. Yesterday was an off day after a good weekend. Always take Mondays off. I have my Spindrift sparkling water this morning. Should have lukewarm coffee. Down the hatch they go. They are the 4 easiest pills in America to swallow. If you take a vitamin, you sometimes have to get up a lot of courage to take it, except vitamin D. That's very easy to take. But a lot of supplements, really, sit down and have some soy with your granite. It's just, they're not very good. Not the case with relieffactor.com. Easy to take, necessary for good health. Do not forget to take it every day. $19.95. And if I can remind everyone out there, a bunch of you came in yesterday. You remembered it was Lent. You remembered you hadn't done anything. And you thought to yourself, I've got to do something. I've got to do something for Lent. I've got to do something for the kids in Honduras. And you all came through marvelously. We have 2 more days. Head over to Food for the Poor banner at HughHewitt.com. Make your best gift. We have 2 more days of the campaign, 3 more days in Lent, 4 more days in Lent. Or you can call 855-359-HOPE. Some people like to call 855-359-4673. I think the best thing to do is to go to HughHewitt.com and hit the banner at the top. Coming right back with David Drucker. I'll talk to him about the tax bill. Democrats trying to take all your money quickly. Stay tuned.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare. It's extremely difficult to maintain. And if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So we need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah, bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. It's Hugh Hewitt with David Drucker, the Washington Examiner. David, I've spent the first hour talking about the Wall Street Journal story. Democrats are going to go after the estate tax in a big way, raising the capital gains tax on everything that you inherit with $1 million exemption, meaning that more than 20 million Americans will get socked with a tax bill that will force them to sell all the assets and give most of the money to Uncle Sam. Do Democrats really think that's going to pass the House?
Very good question. So far I've been sort of surprised that they have not had trouble passing legislation with their little 5-seat majority. It's not a governing majority. It's an organizing majority, but so far they've hung together. So it's possible that it can, and then it's just a matter of whether it can get 50 votes in the Senate. I mean, look, I think the interesting thing here is a lot of voters, if they're paying attention, are discovering that unbeknownst to them, they're rich. And that the government, because they're so rich, wants them to pay. And I'm saying it's a little tongue-in-cheek because I think a lot of voters, if they ever get around to studying these tax proposals, are going to start, wondering who declared them rich because they don't feel rich. And there are many voters, and I've referred to them before, Hugh, as the working wealthy, who do extremely well, and nobody is going to shed a tear for in terms of how expensive life is. But the point is, if they stop working, it all goes away. These are not independently wealthy people that don't have to work, and that's why I've always, as a reporter, hated using the term rich because of the connotation. There are lots of people that do very well, that live in very well-to-do suburbs, but they have expenses. It's voluntary, but the point is they only can afford it if they continue to work and save money. And so I think it's possible, depending on how these tax bills are developed, that the Biden administration is going to have to contend with this. Having said that, I will say that I've discovered over the years, I feel like, as I've covered tax fights, that the American people are a lot less opposed to the idea of higher taxes. A lot of it has to do with who they think is paying. Many Americans are just fine with higher taxes as long as they're not the ones paying. And over the years, both Democratic and Republican tax bills have figured out that if they direct the tax in a certain way, they're going to have a lot less opposition.
Now, and I agree with that. Now, I think most Americans are fine with use tax and consumption taxes and gas taxes and all the kind of, and even income taxes. They don't, if they know what they're going to be paying every year, they adjust it. Wealth taxes make them crazy because they don't know how it affects them. That's why the death tax has always been so unpopular. So for the Democrats' opening bid to go after grandma's house, I don't think many Americans know that they are the beneficiaries of an inheritance that is coming. They know they're going to get something when grandma dies, right? But they don't know what, and they don't know what grandma's worth. Well, grandma's going to be worth nothing after this passes. Oh, you get $1 million exemption. Well, here's the deal. If the house went from $250,000 to $2 million, and you know, David, in California, that's very common. A $250,000 house to a $2 million house over 45 years, that's like all of San Clemente. And they die, and all of a sudden the stepped-up basis doesn't exist. They've got to pay taxes on $1.75 million. So they got to sell that house, pay all the taxes, and there isn't anything left.
Yeah, no, look, it's a huge problem. I mean, look, the especially when you're dealing with property, Hugh. I mean, that's one of the things that spawned the anti-tax revolution in California when I was a kid, because all of a sudden, counties were taxing homes at their new value, and people who had bought these homes for 20, 30, 40,000 decades earlier, they didn't have the money to pay for the tax bill. And so clearly this is something that could be an issue, but it's one of those complicated issues, or it's one of those issues that people can't understand if they pay attention, but it's one of those things that is not top of mind. I think one of the things Democrats are going to have to figure out from a policy perspective, and Elizabeth Warren ran into this problem in the Democratic primary, is when you start messing with wealth taxes, how do you calculate wealth? And, homes can go up and down in value. Tangible assets can go up and down. And so, you can tax something at its value today and its value is different the next day. Now, obviously, whatever you inherit something at, that's its value at the time. These are things that could make some Americans uncomfortable. I think the point I'm making here is a lot of people look at this in a way that is basically, well, you're getting something for free, it's worth a lot of money, so how bad can it really be? And so in order to make the case against this, I think it's sometimes politically difficult.
The first call I had today was from a farmer in Iowa whose family farm's been 4 generations. He intends to pass it to his son. He won't be able to, because they always step up the basis, and farmland is getting more and more profitable. And so are we going to weep tears for the family farmer who gets wiped out? No, but Republicans will win Iowa forever. And that happens with every car wash and every 7-Eleven in America, that's every franchise. If you raise the death tax, you tick off the middle. You raise consumption taxes, income taxes, people don't mind. You raise the death tax, David, and people mind. Last 30 seconds to you.
Well, look, I think it's just a matter of whether or not, as Democrats are trying to put these plans together, if Republicans make an effective case. The only political caution I would raise is Republicans had a decent tax plan in 2017, at least by many accounts. It wasn't necessarily geared towards the wealthy, and yet they still lost the debate, and it didn't help them in 2018.
And they better start debating early that this is an attempt to soak the middle class, which it is. David Drucker, thank you, my friend. I'll be right back. Hour 2 of today's Hugh Hewitt Show. Straight ahead.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
We have to do a better job of convincing the other side how wrong the policies are of the left. They've destroyed the family, destroyed jobs with things like minimum wages. We need to make the better argument. The fact that the majority of people, including the majority of Republicans, Michael, believe in a minimum wage blows my mind. We can't even convince Republicans how stupid that is. How are we going to convince Democrats? We need to make better arguments because I don't believe people are stupid, Michael. I believe that the captain on the Titanic, had he known about the iceberg, would have taken evasive action. We need to take evasive action, and we need to make better arguments to our friends on the left. I gave a speech once, and often when I give a speech, the audience is predominantly white, even though there's no entry fee. So I'm giving a speech, and there's a man standing in the back, a large black man. He's got his arms folded, Michael. He got a frown on his face. I don't think he was part of the security detail. He looked unhappy with the crap I was saying. So I give my speech. The man comes up to me, and he says, Larry, I got to tell you, I am angry. And I thought he was going to say, you said this, you undermined black people, you did this. He said, I had no idea that there were more unarmed whites killed every year than unarmed blacks. I had no idea that young black teenagers were more likely to get a job than a white teenager before the minimum wage kicked in. I had no idea. And he rattled off all the kinds of things that I said. He had no idea that the black family, the out-of-wedlock birth rate had tripled from 1965. No idea. He said, I am angry at myself for being so foolish, for listening to left-wing sources, for not broadening my base, for not knowing more. I'm angry at myself, he told me. Now, if I can do that with that guy, we can do that with the whole country if we make good arguments.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
The people at the border themselves are saying it is because you are welcoming people and said America is essentially open and we will give you whatever you need, health care and education and so on, that millions upon millions of people are entering or will enter the country. Why did you stop if you are against this immigration, is illegal immigration, why did you stop the building of the wall? Just a few things that come to mind that might be asked. Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
In fact, I've got a theory. As the Biden administration is now looking at housing migrants at military bases, as the Biden administration is spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars on motel rooms, brand names, by the way. This isn't just your dude drop in. I'm sure this is the good stuff. ICE has signed a deal worth $89.6 million with a Texas nonprofit to shelter migrants in hotel rooms as the feds process a massive backlog of new arrivals at the border. This deal was announced the other day as illegals are arriving at the border at a rate we haven't seen in decades. ICE has signed a short-term contract with the nonprofit division of Endeavors to provide temporary shelter and processing services for families who have not been expelled and are therefore placed in immigration proceedings for their removal from the United States. The $86.9 million contract provides 1,239 beds and other necessary services. Somebody get out a calculator and do 86.9 million divided by 1,239. Who's got a calculator? Derek, go ahead and do 86.9 million divided by 1,239 beds.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare. It's extremely difficult to maintain. And if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So we need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah.
Bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new
Morning, Glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. The phone line should be open, 1-800-520-1234. I'm going to talk with Byron York and then take your calls, 1-800-520-1234, about the Democrats' tax plan. Byron, the Wall Street Journal this morning unveiling details of what Senate Democrats are planning to do, which is to raise the death tax by taking away stepped-up basis, which is tax talk for The value of an estate is at the time of the decedent. When somebody dies, you value their estate for what it will sell for. They want to go back to what they bought it for. They're going to crush the middle class and the upper middle class in one generation. They're going to wipe them out. Does anybody know?
Does anybody know what?
That the Democrats are coming for them. Because between unleashing inflation and upping the death tax and taxing assets at stepped up base, they're not going to hit 20 million Americans. They're going to hit 150 million Americans. They just don't know it.
Yeah, I was, as you were introducing this, I was thinking of a line in a Washington Post story from yesterday, which described a debate. Here it is right here. Inside the Biden White House, the economic team, about what these spending proposals would do, the combination of spending and taxes. And this is the quote. Some of Biden's economic advisors worried that the president's spending proposals, quote, could jeopardize the nation's long-term financial stability. And they were fearing, quote, triggering a spike in interest rates, which could in turn cause federal debt payments to skyrocket. And I think what's happened here is, they are, you followed these reports of Biden meeting with the historians. He met, with 7 historians in early March.
Yep.
In the East Room of the White House.
John Meacham
and
led.
The big topic is he wants to be FDR. And they literally seriously sit around and talk about Franklin Delano Roosevelt as being the closest historical analog for what Biden wants to do right now. Quote, this is a report from Axios, quote, Beschloss, that is Michael Beschloss, the historian, Beschloss said the parallels include the New Deal economic relief that Franklin Roosevelt brought in 1933, which saved the country from depression and chaos. Now, they have a much different idea of where the country is right now, and they have this idea, and they're all telling themselves, that it needs some sort of absolutely massive economic intervention after the massive economic interventions that we've already had for, quote, COVID relief. Much of the last one, the $1.9 trillion, was not, in fact, COVID relief. And they want to do more. And they have this huge proposal. It's just in the sense that COVID relief was not really COVID relief. The infrastructure thing is not really just infrastructure. It's a vast program covering all sorts of stuff. Carbon emissions, reducing carbon emissions, more environmental measures, narrowing economic inequality, universal pre-K, free community college, extending the child tax credit. They're just going to throw all of this in, and they believe that the United States is in some sort of 1933 situation, which it is not. And they've convinced themselves that this kind of economic intervention is needed. And Biden, who I believe has kind of a hazy and nostalgic view of Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who was president when Biden was born in 1942, sees himself as a man in a hurry because having been born in 1942, he's approaching 80 years old and will very, very much unlikely that he would serve a second term, wants to get some sort of enormous thing done. And this is a long way of getting around to your question. Now some of them are thinking, well, how in the world can we pay for this? We cannot get this, even through some Democrats in Congress, entirely on borrowing, like we could with COVID relief. Congress was willing to say, COVID is a legitimate emergency. We'll just borrow the money and do it. We just got to do it. They can't really rely, even on all the Democrats in Congress, to go that route for all of this optional spending that they're coming up with right now. And that's why they're looking under the cushions of the sofas to try to find more money to pay for this, thus the death tax.
And COVID is the economic equivalent of war. So they borrowed $2 trillion and just nobody gets hurt by that, right? Because unless it's going to release inflation, but slowly, and that will build. If they do it again, the danger to the 10-year Treasury is that it will skyrocket, and indeed the deficit will become far more expensive in all of spending. So they've got to find a way to cushion. That was the Washington Post story. I thought they would go with use taxes like Pete Buttigieg's mileage tax. I thought they would go with the sales tax. I thought they would go with higher income taxes because people know what they're paying. But if they do a estate tax, a death tax, and they lower the amount you get to shelter from it, which they're proposing to do dramatically, and you unleash inflation, you destroy a generation of wealth. All of that money that the boomers saved or that they put into their house, it all gets taxed, whereas under the current tax code, it gets passed on to their children. So 30 or 40 years of work that you may have saved, they will punish that, and indeed they will incentivize people to spend all money and not save anything, Byron. You know, incentives matter. If they say, don't save, we'll tax it if you save, then people will spend, which of course feeds into inflation. It's like they never took Act 10.
You know, maybe the title should be the Boomer Death Tax. I mean, you're right. Well, you're right. There's this essentially generational store of wealth there. If you look at the boomers from 1946 to 64, I don't know what percentage of them have died so far, but most of them are still alive and in their retiring years, many of them, and sitting on their life's savings. And you're absolutely right. This is one of these situations. Well, of course we're doing this. That's where the money is. And Democrats have long wanted, by the way, to essentially confiscate people's life savings and put them in sort of government vehicles and not in private savings, where the way most of them are right now. So my response to you is, of course they'll do this. That's where the money is. It's not like millennials have huge amounts of money saved up that can be tapped or taxed. As a matter of fact, most of the complaints from millennials is that they've gotten kind of a raw economic deal and have not had the ability to save even commensurate with their young years at this moment. So,
well, number one, what it means is you should have died last year, America. If you're a boomer, you should have kicked the bucket last year and your kids would have gotten the money. But they are going after boomer saving. And Byron, you're too young. I'm a boomer. We were raised on buy a house, keep a house, grow your wealth, give it to your kids. That was the message. Buy a house, keep a house. When you die, sell the house, and it goes to your kids. There are millions of people in that generation. Save your money, save your money, save your money. Democrats are going to punish you for doing that. Live modestly, save your money, save your money. They're going to punish everyone. It's nuts.
Isn't the current estate tax limit, is it $5 million?
$11 million. $11 million. Not yet. The upper middle class is protected. The really rich people get smacked, but the upper middle class is protected. This will go from 11 million to 1 million.
11 million to 1 million. Yeah,
but they're hiding it by saying we're going to get rid of. They're not going to declare that. They're going to say, but we're going to take away stepped-up bases, which is how you calculate small businesses, farmland, houses, and assets, stocks. You know, if you've been a saver, you're going to get crushed by this. There are lots of stories out there. Just Google greatest generational wealth transfer in history. The boomers are going to leave all their money to their kids. Not anymore. Not with this Democrat. But I just think what's amazing, do they think we're not going to notice?
Well, they got just incredibly little resistance when they threw the kitchen sink in the COVID relief bill. I do think, and I believe you and I have talked about this, one of the amazing things was that Republicans didn't really do a very good job of informing the public what was in the COVID relief bill, parts that didn't have anything to do about COVID relief, and how Democrats were actually expanding the welfare state for a year on the bet that they could make it permanent the next year, and so that they would have used the COVID emergency to reach traditional Democratic goals. This is on steroids.
On steroids. This is the OK Boomer death tax. I really thank you, Byron. You've helped me name it. Okay, Boomer, is there contemptuous derision of the older people? Well, that's going to backfire because you're not going to get their money. Byron York at Twitter. Stay tuned, America.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before, both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
For 50 or so years, we've really not been teaching what does it mean to be free? What is self-government? What are we don't teach that. And so you drift along and something like this happens and people just sort of go along because Americans are nice. Who do you think is behind this?
Yeah, I've identified a lot of the bad actors. Big tech is up 24 billion, 26 billion, over 100 billion for, the six guys who run big tech. Amazon is up, triple digit billions, since last year. So, and they're all part of something called the COVID-19 Response Project, which started in March of last year to message how terrifying COVID was.
I'm fascinated in a way that there are so few voices like yours that you're still seeing what you've always seen. It's just that everything has shifted.
Yeah, I didn't leave the left left me, as my husband said. Well,
Reagan said,
oh, really? Is he quoting Reagan?
The Democratic Party left me. And I think this has been a drift over the decades, but it's gotten so dramatic that there are many folks like you, traditionally on the left, who are talking about the same things those of us on the conservative side are talking about.
Yes. And thank you, Eric, for noticing. I have been completely consistent in saying the same things ever since I wrote The End of America in 2007, criticizing each president as he arose for overreach when he overreached. I don't think there are that few of us. I think there are that few of us at a national level or in leadership. And I also think a lot of us are stunned.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Studio. Of course, nobody brought up during the press conference that polls show that Americans want voter ID, including black Americans. Yet your party trashes voter ID as voter suppression. Can you please explain how it is that black people want something that you call voter suppression? That didn't come up. Nor did the stunt that Tammy Duckworth and Macy Hirono tried to pull come up. Two Asian American senators, Democrats. A couple days ago, they told Biden that they weren't going to confirm any more new nominees until and unless he appoints an Asian American to a high-level position. Mr. President, what is your reaction to being pressured to put someone in your administration based on skin color, as opposed to performance, as opposed to your comfort level with him or her?
22 minutes after the hour, Jesse in Utah, you're on the Hugh Hewitt Show, 1-800-520-1234. What say you, Jesse?
Hey, man, I got a question for you. So we've got one of these family ranches that will be inherited eventually. Do they know they're going to price us out of these things with this when they change that tax? And do you think they'll do anything to try to save some of these farms? And what worries me when I listen to you and everybody else and as I watch this go through is we've been priced out of these ranches. You know, if they appraise them at what they sell for today, not many of these ranches get handed down anymore. I mean, we've had offers on ours for millions above what a guy could buy it for if he was going to work it and live off of it. They're bought for hunting, enjoyment, and just kind of become a billionaire game, really. So, do you, I mean, they're not spending these taxes like they're going to just kill us out, but that's kind of the feeling I get is there's no chance to do anything. So what does a common peasant like me even do as I see this stuff coming forward other than all you and complain about it?
Democrats don't care. They don't care. I mean, the OK Boomer meme, which is sort of resentment of millennials against their moms and dads and grandmas and grandparents who worked hard and saved and got jobs and collected wealth, and they intend to pass it on as you do, right, Jesse? You're not giving it away. You're not going to go to Vegas with your ranch, right? You're going to give it to your kids.
Barely afford to go 100 miles down the road with it, and it's on its fourth generation.
Yeah. So you're not going to go spend the nest egg as that famous movie did. You're going to pass it on. You're not going to be able to pass it on. The kids are going to have to sell it and to pay the income taxes, and they'll get left with the pittance. And all that generational wealth is going to go to Silicon Valley, to billionaires who do not care. They're going to crush the upper middle class and what David Drucker calls the working wealthy. You might look wealthy, but you're not because you got a lot of land and a nice ranch. But when you die, and we're all going to die, they're going to take the money. It's incredible, actually. It's really kind of incredible.
I get the feeling that there's just nothing we can do about it. I mean, it's going to go away. I can already see it coming. If we get hit with that tax, we've looked at this a million different times. We get hit with some of these inheritance taxes that this raises that. It puts us out of it. I mean, it's not even a question, but my desire is to go ahead and try to do it no matter what kind of tax they throw on us. I don't really have a choice but to try to keep it going for the next, for my kids. I just don't know that it's going to be possible here in a little while. It'll be owned by Bill Gates soon enough.
Yeah, and the only way to avoid taxes at death is to spend during life. And that's why everyone ought to be giving as much money as they can to their kids now, with the proviso that those kids save it. Because if you wait to, they're going to get it when I die, I've got to take care of my retirement, they will not get the money under the Democrats' tax plan. They will not get it. Jesse, thank you. 1-800-520-1234. Let me check the market, brought to you by andrewandtodd.com. andrewandtodd.com. Help you refinance your house to get cash out. And maybe you should get cash out and just give it to your kids. You can give them $30,000 a year without a tax. Maybe you should go get the money and give it to your kids. Look, for every action by the Democrats to tax things, there are responses. People leave states like they leave California. They leave high-income tax areas to go to low-income tax areas, from California to Florida, for example. Now, I don't know what it will do to the real estate market. But you'd better check with andrewandtodd.com about paying as little as you can on your mortgage and taking out as much money as you can and putting it into vehicles to transfer wealth without taxes. That sounds complicated, but andrewandtodd.com keep a list of financial advisors that they can refer you to. But you got to call them first, 888-888-1172. Biggest news is that they had a hedge fund kind of collapse yesterday, Archbishop Capital. And for a while, it looked like it was going to be bad for the market, and the market sloughed it off. Because when you're spending this kind of money, made up money, it's made up markets. When the Democrats spend $2 trillion and they get work on spending $4 trillion and taxing $3 trillion, there's nothing to do except invest your money in the market and pray. But you should refinance your house. andrewandtodd.com. Come right back. I got to go back to China and talk with Admiral Stav about what's going on over there, because it looks like they're getting ready to make a move on Taiwan and the Philippines. We'll talk with the Admiral after the break. Stay tuned, America.
Don't forget to sign up for the Hughiverse. All of Hugh's broadcasts on demand, the after show, which in my opinion is worth the price all by itself, Dwayne FM, and all sorts of bonus content. www.hughiverse.com.
Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
My theory is that the reason the left is pivoting and desperately trying to focus on gun control is that'll be the shiny object that takes all the attention away from the crisis we have along the border. There's no way Democrats can possibly explain this surge by illegals. And yes, I know the mainstream media wants to call them migrants, but they are, after all, illegals. There's no way to explain this other than the Biden administration's invitation to come in. I saw clips last night of candidate Joe Biden saying, we want a couple million people. We want people here. We're America. And now, of course, there's a real catastrophe unfolding. And ground zero seems to be Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare. It's extremely difficult to maintain. And if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So we need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah, bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
It doesn't seem to me, when you read the Federalist Papers and the Constitution, that it's possible that the founders could have foreseen anything along the lines of big tech in America. The power that is in these few companies, clearly our Congress doesn't know what to do about it. They don't have any clue that the free market is not an idol to be worshipped. It's a part of a larger freedom. And so here we are.
I don't think the founders could have envisioned it, but they had correctives for it, which is why we need to, really rise up peacefully and use the First amendment of the Constitution to fight back. If we weren't in quote unquote lockdown, we could assemble in our town halls, in our churches, in our synagogues and mosques and talk to each other. But lockdown prevents us from using our First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, and that's intentional. So all of our speech is forced onto these social media platforms. And then to just finish the kind of evil circle, big tech has been purging conservative voices, which I discussed with Tucker Carlson a few nights ago. And big tech is also an embrace with my team, the Democrats. But what's going to happen is a closed circle of all speech being, cleansed of conservative voices. And then there's another, influencer, which is, very dark, which is China. A lot of thoughtful people with whom I'm in touch who are in the world of statecraft and analysis are very concerned that China is also exploiting, our vulnerability to weaken us. Look at what's happening to our country. We're not learning our history. Our history is under attack.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. 33 minutes after the hour. That music means Admiral James Stavridis joins me. He is the former Allied Supreme Commander of NATO, former head of Southern Command, retired United States Navy. Good morning, Admiral. How are you?
Doing great, Hugh. How's it going?
Very good. I believe that your book 2034 has had a salutary effect, your novel with Elliot Ackerman, on the media. All of a sudden, I am now seeing a wave of articles on the coming conflict with China, and today in the Telegraph, the coming conflict with Russia, provocative moves in the Philippines, flying 20 jets over Taiwan, declaring they will stop and seize boats in the South China Sea. More people are alerted through fiction than anything else. So congratulations on that. But do you think it's overdone, or is it correct?
Well, what I will say is one of the sharpest observers of the international scene is a conservative geopolitical thinker named Neil Ferguson. He's written a whole series of books about a wide variety of topics, including U.S. and China. He did a column over the weekend. He's a fellow columnist with me at Bloomberg Opinion. And it was about how close is a war with China. And of course, he mentioned very nicely and cited the novel, along with a whole series of nonfiction sources. The last line in his article was, Stavridis gets everything right except the date. It's not going to be 2034, more like 2024. So I think that overstates it perhaps a bit. I stand by my dire prediction of 10 to 15 years because I don't think China feels it's quite ready yet. But certainly the tensions are rising. President Xi is using this to stoke the fires of nationalism in China. And the incident you describe of Chinese fighter jets over the Taiwan Strait is a new high, if you will, during this tense period. Watch out.
In Foreign Policy magazine online this morning, Admiral, there is an article that I want to read, just the headline in the opening graph. China's military could turn small clashes into major conflicts. It's not clear who's in command when things go wrong, by Blake Herzinger. And it begins by citing relations between the U.S. and China are fraught with escalating rhetoric and risk of miscalculation on both sides. Military affairs aren't the only aspect of the bilateral relation, but they're the most dangerous one. And it reviews that President Xi is pushing the envelope all over the place and that the unexpected conflict can gather very quickly. And it points to the 1968-69 conflict along the Russian-China border, the conflicts with India in the past, the invasion of Vietnam. You know how China acts. Every 15 to 20 years, they do something completely out of the box. And this time it would have unintended consequences, I think.
It would indeed, and you cite good historical precedent. I'll throw another one onto that barbecue, and that would be 1914, August. Let's go back there. Here are the great powers of Europe are intertwined economically. Many serious books are written about how it would be impossible for these nations to go to war because the economics will keep them from doing so. What happens? A Serbian extremist in an obscure corner of the Balkans assassinates a Grand Duke of the Austro-Hungarian Empire. I mean, it sounds like an opera, except the Austro-Hungarian Empire, one of the 5 great nations of the time, no longer exists because of that. The Russian Empire fell, and the guns of August, as Barbara Tuchman called them, go off, and they sleepwalk into a war based on an incident, one that had unintended consequences. So to conclude, flash forward to today, and I've been there. I've been a young 30-something sea captain driving a destroyer through disputed waters. These are young people. I was the oldest person on the ship out of like 400, and they're young and they have training in the military. They're going to defend themselves. They're going to defend their nation, and that's true on both sides. So it's not President Xi necessarily making a decision in the towers of Beijing. It's young officers on the ground or in the jets over the Taiwan Straits could lead to an incident. Nations can stumble into war.
Now, the Nixon seminar meets on Tuesday next, and Co-Chairman Pompeo and O'Brien are hosting Peter Thiel and their 15 members to talk about China. Peter Thiel is a China hawk. He believes that they are aggressively moving to control the world economy and do not hesitate to draw back from conflict. And among the topics will be, when does the move for Taiwan come? And as I prepare the materials to send out to the members of the seminar, the Taiwan move has moved up in many people's book. You mentioned it obliquely. It's 2034 in the novel by that name that you and Elliot Ackerman wrote. But a lot of people think President Xi is committed to 2027 or earlier. And I mean, I think that's actually becoming the consensus position, and not via invasion, but via little green men. Have you been reading those articles?
I have read the articles. I'll give you 2 impeccable sources at the very highest levels who are reading daily the intelligence, and that would be Admiral Phil Davidson, the commander of the Indo-Pacific. In other words, all U.S. military, Army, Navy, Marines, Air Force, etc., in the Pacific and Indian Oceans, Admiral Phil Davis, and his immediate subordinate, the Navy 4-star admiral, who is in command of the entire Pacific Fleet commander, Admiral Lung, call sign Aquilino. The 2 of them, in open testimony before the Congress, and I was honestly quite surprised at their candor, but glad to hear it because we need to hear it. Both of them indicated that they felt that date was much closer, and Phil Davidson threw out within the next 6 years. So I try not to do math in public, but 2021 plus 6 is 2027. I think that's where a lot of this commentary is coming from, because here's a guy who eats, sleeps, drinks, wakes up in the morning thinking about what a war with China would be like and how it would start. He threw out that date. He was then supported by Admiral Aquilino, who is going to take his place, assuming confirmation of the Senate, which will come momentarily. And Admiral Aquilino, in his confirmation hearing, said he thinks it will come, quote, much sooner than people think. I think those 2 impeccable sources are what are driving a great deal of this conversation.
And that leads to the question, has Team Biden done enough to signal that we will stand by Taiwan? Or, weakness is provocative. It's always been weakness is provocative. If the CCP does not believe we'll do anything to help Taiwan, why not? It's a rich country. It's one China. It's the ambition. And some people believe President Xi promised his Politburo that he would get Taiwan by 2027 when they took away term limits. Are you expecting that kind of aggressiveness from President Xi?
Let me start by saying I hope not. And I hope someone the other day, Hugh, asked me, if you could force anyone to read your novel, who would it be? And I think the answer is pretty obvious. I would force President Xi to read it and hope that he would have the same reaction the hundreds of thousands of people who I think will eventually read 24 will have, which is, boy, we don't want to get into a war with China, and they don't want to get in a war with us. So I hope President Xi does not, but as the saying goes, hope is not a strategy. The strategy ought to be to make it apparent to China that if they made a military move on Taiwan, it would be extremely costly. We can do that first and best by helping the Taiwanese be fully prepared. But I think, to your point, and to directly answer your question, I think it is time for the United States to step away from this policy of what's called strategic ambiguity and simply say we will not tolerate an armed invasion of Taiwan. And that ought to include cyber and little green men.
A senior East Asian diplomat told me last week, off the record, so I'm not going to name names, that 2027 is the hard deadline, and it won't be an invasion, it will be little green men, that they will simply fly in enough security forces, because there's quite a lot of back and forth. People don't understand Taiwan and the mainland just do a lot of business, and a lot of people come in and out, and they'll fly in enough people, and that they will have pre-planned, take the radio station, take the TV station, take the airport kind of approach. Would we then fly in support, Admiral?
I think under the current scenario, it would be unlikely because we would be presented with a complete fait accompli. I think in the scenario you're describing, and I'll say in a moment how we can avoid getting to that scenario, but in the scenario you're describing, our options are far less apparent, but they would include immediate, significant global sanctions on China. It would be much like what happened after Russia invaded Ukraine and annexed Crimea. I think that's a pretty good description of what the playbook would look like. What we ought to be doing is helping Taiwan today prepare for that exact scenario. And that's more on the intelligence, information, internal, domestic action. How do you control airports? How do you screen passengers? How do you ascertain where the deep cells are planted in your nation? And all of that is hard work that I hope the Taiwanese are doing. I think they are quite cognizant of all the scenarios we've described. They are not without their own assets in this regard. But at the moment, I think we serve neither our interests nor those of Taiwan, nor really those of the world, by not having a forceful policy and stepping away from this idea of strategic ambiguity. That idea has passed.
Last question, Admiral. If you're General Secretary Xi and you're studying the Obama administration response to Ukraine and saying Joe Biden was in the room in that year, and you're extrapolating the conduct of Obama-Biden to Biden-Harris, what would he expect to happen after an invasion or a move against Taiwan?
What he might expect, and I think he would be mistaken, would be a similar response, which is to say, not much, just sanctions and words. What the Biden team needs to do is convince President Xi that we are serious, that this would not be a repeat. And that means more than arguing about human rights and Uyghurs, and those are important topics. But this is a much more important and direct form of military deterrence. And it is called telling China this will be more costly. The candle will not be worth the game, and we will not repeat the way we effectively sat by and watched Ukraine lose a third of its territory.
The trouble is, we'll talk about it next week. How do you get them to believe that? Because they saw what we didn't do, which was everything, in 2012, and now they've got the Olympics, and the playbook is finish the Olympics and invade Taiwan. We'll talk about that next week. Admiral James Stavridis, congratulations. 2034 is the novel. It continues to sell. It's not in the backdrop. You must not be at home because it's not in the backdrop there, Admiral.
You've just got a tight shot. Open up the shot and you'll see it.
No, it's, let's blame it on Dwayne. All right, Admiral, well done. Thank you. 2034 is the book. I'll be right back, America. But don't forget, relieffactor.com. There it is. I already took it in the first hour, reminding you take it now. Be ready for a war with China. Get in shape. That will really disrupt your life. Democrats will take all your money with the new estate tax, and China will take all your freedom with a war in Taiwan and the South China Sea. Really, if you read 2034, you'll just be eating Relief Factor around the clock because your body will hurt with the predictions that are therein. Look, relieffactor.com only actually helps minor aches and pains. It supports the temporary relief of them. It's like over the counter. That maybe you're like me, you can't take an NSAID and you're not supposed to take aspirin, blah, blah, blah. Well, try relieffactor.com. Avoid the stomach upset, avoid all the bad things that come with over-the-counter products, and try relieffactor.com. All natural, safely tested, tried by tens of thousands. I'll be right back, America. Stay tuned.
Portions of the Hugh Hewitt Show are brought to you by Food for the Poor.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
The people at the border themselves are saying it is because you are welcoming people and said America is essentially open and we will give you whatever you need, health care and education and so on, that millions upon millions of people are entering or will enter the country. Why did you stop if you are against this immigration, is illegal immigration, why did you stop the building of the wall? Just a few things that come to mind that might be asked. Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Mike Gallagher Show.
In fact, I've got a theory. As the Biden administration is now looking at housing migrants at military bases, as the Biden administration is spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars on motel rooms, brand names, by the way. This isn't just your dude drop in. I'm sure this is the good stuff. ICE has signed a deal worth $89.6 million with a Texas nonprofit to shelter migrants in hotel rooms as the feds process a massive backlog of new arrivals at the border. This deal was announced the other day as illegals are arriving at the border at a rate we haven't seen in decades. ICE has signed a short-term contract with the nonprofit division of Endeavors to
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt. I have to issue an apology. Yesterday, we had a caller who called me Mike, thought it was Mike Gallagher, and I had some fun with him, and Dwayne had some fun with the caller, and Mike's feelings were hurt, and I think they were really hurt by the fact that Dwayne said he couldn't find China on a map, and I let out the secret about single-syllable Scrabble.
Well, he can't.
Now, I know we can't, but that's why we stopped playing Risk. People don't know. When you go on the road with your host, Prager and Gallagher and I would go on the road. We've been doing this for 20 years together. So you go on the road and you're doing a number of market build, and so you play games, and we would play Risk, and Mike would always lose. Dennis and I would gang up on him, and we'd beat him. And when Elder joined in, sometimes Elder would win, sometimes Prager would win. I usually won, but Mike never ran. So Mike said, let's switch to Scrabble. And so we said, okay, we'll play Scrabble. Now, I don't like Scrabble because Prager always wins Scrabble. Elder can win Scrabble. He uses a lot of fake legal terms that I'm afraid to challenge. And Mike always lost. So he then decided that we needed to play speed Scrabble. And I shouldn't have told anyone about it. It's a professional secret. And it's single syllable Scrabble. Mike wanted to play single syllable Scrabble. And so we did, but, in, of, duck, truck.
Map.
Well, map, he didn't do very well with map.
Yeah, I know.
But it did get him out of China, right? So yesterday, Mike got upset with us he got upset actually with Dwayne, because Dwayne, I think, led me into telling people about single syllable Scrabble, which is called Gallagher Scrabble. So when you sit down and someone would say Gallagher Scrabble, and when he was losing that, what would he do, Dwayne?
He would just attack me.
Well, no, he would turn over the board.
He would flip over the board. He would blame it on me because he just likes to kind of punch down in class a little bit. But
go after the producer who can't talk.
Yeah, he just turns over the board and just quits playing.
It's called a pink lady or a Gallagher move or a strong Gallagher move. We have lots of words for Mike, but Gallagher Scrabble is a thing. You can only use single syllable words, and he says it's for speed. Well, anyway, here's what Mike said yesterday.
No, you don't. I'm driving on I-85 in Atlanta.
What, does driving obscure your hearing?
Well, no, it obscures my mind is what it does.
Okay, go ahead. I'm going to let you off the hook here, but Mike
That certainly makes it safe to drive.
Yeah, that's good. Are you going?
Anyway, the only message that I really had is, I don't know if you remember.
I think he's done there, right? I think he left it. So that nasty voice you hear in the background is that Dwayne Patterson. I shouldn't say nasty. He's a very warm, cheerful, sunny guy. Everybody who's dealt with Dwayne just walks away feeling a lot better about life. You just feel warm and fuzzy inside after you deal with Mr. Personality there, Dwayne Patterson. And I think that's why Hugh gives us a hard time all the time, because of that guy. Gallagher. Now, it's true I might not be able to find China on the map. But boy, I can do a radio show, and boy, I can keep you glued to the speaker, and boy, we have some fun, and we do things that, other shows don't do, admittedly. And I admit,
for a pretty good reason.
I am not real big on the history of the Battle of Antietam, because that's why I would say Antietam instead of Antietam. I'm not real big on
stop for a second.
You
the
noticed
producer whispered that in his ear, didn't he?
I think so. You noticed that he tried to come up
that
with
was Eric.
He tried to come up with a battle, and he couldn't come up with any battle. Not just Antietam.
That's because we stopped playing Risk. Stop beating up on him. You're just going to encourage the guy. He is hurt. His feelings are hurt. And then I went on to let people know about Gallagher Scrabble. And that's a thing. There are books out now on how to play Gallagher Scrabble, because the longest single-syllable word is what? Do you know?
Map.
No. Mike gets map. And so Gallagher Scrabble, I'm sorry I told anyone, Mike, it's one of those things that what happens on the road stays on the road, right? If you're going to play Gallagher Scrabble, we're not supposed to tell people about Gallagher Scrabble.
But if you do play with Mike, just don't sit next to the board, because he gets frustrated easy, and the board and everything just goes flying.
So he goes on to tell everyone to call me and call me Mike. I'll try it. David in Sacramento. How are you, David?
Hey, Hugh. How are you this morning?
Oh, good. You missed the Gallagher show, obviously, but then again, that's what usually happens.
Have you ever heard of Eric?
Do you know Eric or Mike Gallagher?
Do you know who
ever
Eric
heard of these guys?
I decided not to pile on this morning.
Well, I mean, do you ever actually listen to him?
No, I must admit I do not.
Oh, well.
I listen to Hugh Hewitt every morning, is what I do.
You mean you've never heard of Eric?
I've heard of Eric, but
have you ever played Gallagher Scrabble?
I have not.
Does it appeal to you?
Syllabic Scrabble for me. So.
Hugh, go ahead. You wanted to call about the boomer tax.
So, look, like all bad ideas on public policy, they usually originate in California. And this one in particular, last November, we had on the ballot in California Proposition 19, which was a crafty idea cooked up by the California Association of Realtors and the public employee unions to do just this, to get rid of the stepped-up basis. So, look for the same type of thing to go on at the national level. The National Association of Realtors.
It's coming, David. It's called the OK Boomer Tax Plan. Screw everyone born between 46 and 64. That's what Democrats are going to do, but they're also going to end up hitting their kids. More on that next hour. Stay tuned to the Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before, both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop, now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
For 50 or so years, we've really not been teaching what does it mean to be free? What is self-government? What are we don't teach that. And so you drift along and something like this happens and people just sort of go along because Americans are nice. Who do you think is behind this?
Yeah, I've identified a lot of the bad actors. Big tech is up 24 billion, 26 billion, over 100 billion for, the six guys who run big tech. Amazon is up, triple digit billions, since last year. So, and they're all part of something called the COVID-19 Response Project, which started in March of last year to message how terrifying COVID was.
I'm fascinated in a way that there are so few voices like yours that you're still seeing what you've always seen. It's just that everything has shifted.
Yeah, I didn't leave the left left me, as my husband said. Well,
Reagan said,
oh, really? Is he quoting Reagan?
The Democratic Party left me. And I think this has been a drift over the decades, but it's gotten so dramatic that there are many folks like you, traditionally on the left, who are talking about the same things those of us on the conservative side are talking about.
Yes. And thank you, Eric, for noticing. I have been completely consistent in saying the same things ever since I wrote The End of America in 2007, criticizing each president as he arose for overreach when he overreached. I don't think there are that few of us. I think there are that few of us at a national level or in leadership. And I also think a lot of us are stunned.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Larry Elder Show.
Studio. Of course, nobody brought up during the press conference that polls show that Americans want voter ID, including black Americans. Yet your party trashes voter ID as voter suppression. Can you please explain how it is that black people want something that you call voter suppression? That didn't come up. Nor did the stunt that Tammy Duckworth and Macy Hirono tried to pull come up. Two Asian American senators, Democrats. A couple days ago, they told Biden that they weren't going to confirm any more new nominees until and unless he appoints an Asian American to a high-level position. Mr. President, what is your reaction to being pressured to put someone in your administration based on skin color, as opposed to performance, as opposed to your comfort level with him or her, as opposed to background? Is this the direction we should be taking America, Mr. President? When you said you wanted a cabinet that looked like America, you're implying that unless the cabinet is racially reflective of the country, then it's an invalid cabinet, invalid administration. Is that what you're telling us? Should we do that with the NBA, Mr. President? Should we do that with doctors? Should we do that with people who design bridges, airline pilots? Should we hire based upon racial diversity and proportionality as opposed to competence? I'm asking.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not. Is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state. Has he come out for D.C. as a state? Listen, if we want to do a realignment in this country, I read to you last week or 2 weeks ago where there's a movement in Oregon to join Idaho. Let's go back to the president talking about the border.
It's not like somebody sitting on a hand-hewn table in Guatemala, in somewhere in Mexico or in Guadalupe saying, I got a great idea. Let's sell everything we have. Give it to a coyote. Have them take our kids across the border into a desert where they don't speak the language. Won't that be fun? Let's go.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
My theory is that the reason the left is pivoting and desperately trying to focus on gun control is that'll be the shiny object that takes all the attention away from the crisis we have along the border. There's no way Democrats can possibly explain this surge by illegals. And yes, I know the mainstream media wants to call them migrants, but they are, after all, illegals. There's no way to explain this other than the Biden administration's invitation to come in. I saw clips last night of candidate Joe Biden saying, we want a couple million people. We want people here. We're America. And now, of course, there's a real catastrophe unfolding. And ground zero seems to be Texas.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Morning, glory, America. Bonjour, hi, Canada. It's Hugh Hewitt. Thank you for listening to the Hugh Hewitt Show. I'm joined this hour at the beginning by Governor Scott Walker, former governor of Wisconsin, president of the Young America's Foundation. Good morning, Governor. How are you?
Hey, Hugh, I'm great. Thanks for having me on. Glad to be with you.
I'm looking forward to talking about the long game, but I first, couple of quick questions. Have you ever played Gallagher Scrabble?
Yeah, it's just single syllables. I heard that's pretty simple to play that way.
Well, you play with your kids, et cetera, or other radio hosts. I just wanted to make sure it had spread to Wisconsin. So you're pretty good at that.
The Gallagher rules have made it across here. If you want to start out easy, you play single syllable. In other words, you just play Gallagher rules.
Gallagher rules. In fact, that's a better way to call it. Gallagher rules. That applies to golf, too. Governor Walker, Young America's Foundation has a plan called the Long Game. Did you anticipate when you released the Long Game that the Democrats would issue their tax plan, which wants to abolish stepped-up basis and becomes effectively a confiscatory tax on boomer savings?
No, it's a prime example of how the folks on the left think far, far into the future. They think about new ways to gain power, which is exactly why we've got to have a long game plan to undo much of what they've done over many, many decades.
What do you think will be the reaction in America? They took the lid off a little bit in the Wall Street Journal today. Tax everybody's inheritance at a stepped-up basis so that you no longer get, you don't get stepped-up basis. It's the original cost. I don't know how that works in Wisconsin. In California, that means everyone who bought a house in the 70s is going to have a monumental, whopping tax bill. They'll have to sell everything to pay it. Is that going to fly?
Well, and I don't think so, but it's one of those where, other than the Wall Street Journal, there's not enough people talking about it out there. I mean, obviously, you're talking about it, but folks on the street, I don't think fully understand or appreciate not only this, but so many of the things that they're pushing and what the real-time impact is going to be. Sadly, we've seen, with their flawed policies at the border, what a crisis has created. This would create not just a tax crisis, but I think long-term an economic crisis.
Well, I think what happens, if you unleash inflation and all assets appreciate, the exemption for stepped-up basis becomes irrelevant, and everything gets confiscated. It's a kind of a brilliant plan if you want to bring everyone down to the level of everyone else. It will solve the income inequality gap, but it will do so in tremendous damage to economic opportunity. What's the long game on taxes?
It'll be very much like, remember Margaret Thatcher stating. Remember one of the Labor Party folks really ridiculing her about the gap between the rich and the poor, and I loved her response, paraphrasing, but basically saying, so you'd only be happy if the gap was narrow, if the poor were poor, as long as the gap wasn't as big. And that's the grand policy here, not just with taxes, but everything they're doing is about pitting one group versus the other to try and create this Marxist envy that we've seen elsewhere in the world that hasn't succeeded here because we don't have a class-based society. Everyone, no matter where they start, could do well in America, and they want to change all of that.
Coming up at the bottom of the hour, I'm talking with Archbishop Chaput about his book, Things Worth Dying For, and a lot of it is devoted to the fact that America is not class-based and that there is great mobility. I'm afraid that's going to end. If this very narrow majority continues to be exploited the way it was. What did you make of the first massive spending bill, Governor Walker?
Oh, it's painful for me, someone who's raised concerns and raised the red flag of concern over the debt and the deficit problems we've had, now just to pile more on, most of which, I think, 91% of which in this bill had nothing to do with health-related COVID issues, but instead was just about more government spending. And everything they do is about that. It's why the first bill they introduced in the House, the first bill they've introduced in the Senate is all about, corrupt politicians claiming more power in Washington and taking it away from the states. We see it with every one of the things they're working on. And again, there's only a few voices out there, talk radio, the Wall Street Journal, a few digitally online, but we've got to fight back. Otherwise, we risk losing this great republic. Reagan was right when he talked about how freedom's just one generation away from extinction, and we've got to fight for it.
So first things first, what is Young America's Foundation? Where do people find it?
YAF.org. In fact, if you want the long game plan, YAF.org/long game. Simply put, Young America's Foundation is training the next generation of freedom fighters. Started with William F. Buckley in the 1960s. Ronald Reagan was one of the earliest leaders. Today is on over 2,000 campuses helping conservatives, supporting conservative students across the nation. Love being the president. Been there just about 2 months now, but came in and realized what we do is great. We just got to do more because the left is doing more. We got to do it with more students and with younger students, and that's the long game.
Where is headquarters for YAF?
Well, it's a combination of places. The main headquarters is in Reston, Virginia, about a half an hour west of Washington, D.C., but for about 22, almost 23 years now, they've also had headquarters, or not headquarters, but offices in Santa Barbara, California. And the reason for that is because back in the 90s, when President and Mrs. Reagan were looking to sell the ranch, YAF acquired it, and not only keep it as a historical site, there's now a Reagan Ranch Center where we have conferences and gatherings and students, and then they get a chance to come up and see the ranch exactly the way it was left when our 40th president and the First Lady lived there.
I have been up to the ranch at the invitation of YAF, and it's amazing to see that Gorbachev and Queen Elizabeth and how simple. Aren't you amazed by that, Scott Walker? It's the simplest place in the world.
That was one of the big things that stunned people like the Queen and Gorbachev and others, was particularly the Soviets. They expected you'd go up and there'd be this grand palace that, living a different life than they did back with the people. It was actually the opposite, that Ronald Reagan couldn't have been more simple, small ranch house. I love the fact, you probably saw this too, when we were there a decade ago for the first time, the ranch house inside the bedroom, the only thing that the Corneliuses had left were two metal bed frames. They were twin bed frames, and Reagan, being someone who grew up in the Midwest during the Depression, couldn't throw anything away, so he tied them together with zip ties and put a queen-size mattress on top, and he still was too tall, so there's a wood bench at the end of his side of the bed for his feet to hang over on. That's classic Midwestern, save everything, be frugal.
I remember I was going to say the ties on the bed frame because it's so startling. I also like the book selection, which remains the same as when President Reagan last used the ranch. I also am amazed that Nancy Reagan, about whom everything is glamour and red and socialite, she went there willingly for 1 out of 8 days of the presidency. President Reagan spent 8 years in the White House. 1 out of 8 days, 1 year of the presidency was spent at the Reagan Ranch, which is about the opposite of glamour as you can get. The tack room isn't it's the size of a kitchen. It's just so tiny.
Yes, everything was tiny. Well, but to me, it's a great American love story. The two of them and the love that they had for each other. Clearly, she went there because of the fact that he loved being there, and therefore she loved being with him. They would go riding each day, she and he in the morning, and then he'd go out later in the day again with the Secret Service. He'd do his work early in the morning and late at night, and in between riding, he literally would clear the brush, all the fence posts around the property he made out of old telephone poles. Again, it's just a classic American story. Not only the frugality, but I love up on the top where you go out, you can see the ocean, you can see on the other side the valley. This was his vision of freedom, not only his personal freedom, but I think it epitomizes his belief in the American people and the untapped potential of this great country. And he could visually feel and sense that there. No wonder he was there, like you say, equivalent of 1 out of the 8 years he was in office.
Young America's Foundation owns it. The center is also very good. I've spoken once at the YAF Center. The key is, though, the long game and getting it into circulation. What's its central tenet, Governor Walker?
Yeah, for us, we've got to reach every student, not just some. And the fact of the matter is that we've got to reach students younger, because the crises, the siege that we see today on campus, we see it increasingly in culture. We see it, sadly, even in our communications with some of the censorship for big tech. All those things the left has been doing, and they didn't start yesterday. They've been at it for decades, all the way back to Saul Alinsky in the 60s, and systematically, although it's accelerated over the last few years, but systematically embedding themselves all throughout our society. And for us to undo that, it's going to take more than just being in the battle of the day. And we have to be in these battles right now. We can't concede anything for the moment, but we have to have a long-term plan to turn our schools, our colleges, our culture, and our communications around. And that's really what the long game is about. getting, for example, 1 million more students involved in our programs, reaching students on not just 2,000 campuses, but on all 4,000 campuses, even getting, even getting to the younger ages, where we see the left. A good example, we exposed a case a few months ago in Ames, Iowa, of all places, where BLM had come in, partnered with the local school district, and was actually, under the guise of Black History Month, was teaching even preschoolers about, they could pick their gender. This is wrong. We've got to counter it. That's part of the long game, is to give parents, even as young as elementary school parents, the tools to counteract what they're teaching the Hate America Fund.
YAF.org. Governor Scott Walker, thank you for joining me. I'll be right back, America, on the Hugh Hewitt Show.
Trending now on the Dennis Prager Show.
Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state. Has he come out for D.C. as a state? Listen, if we want to do a realignment in this country, I read to you last week or 2 weeks ago where there's a movement in Oregon to join Idaho.
Trending now on America First with Sebastian Gorka.
I'm really glad you bring up the issue of values and patriotism, Seb, because I think this is so important for people in the West to understand. And as someone who comes from outside, it's easier to see. I'm working on my first book, which will be called An Immigrant's Love Letter to the West.
Wow.
And this is really the point that I want to hit home. People need to understand in the West that what we have here is precious. It's rare. It's extremely difficult to maintain. And if we do not remember what our values are, and we don't speak up for them, if we don't protect them, if we're not patriotic in a healthy way, the West will die, like every great civilization before. And what comes in place of that is going to be China or Russia. Now, as someone who comes from Russia, I can tell you that's not a pleasant outcome. I know a lot of Chinese people. I promise you, if you care about, as people on the left claim to care about racism and, inequality and oppression, well, a world dominated by China, I'm not sure that's going to be less racist. I'm sorry, right? So we need to remember.
But the donuts aren't that good. The light cheese are better.
Yeah, bat donuts are probably not the best. But look, I think people in the West really need to understand that this is a civilizational issue. All this woke stuff, it's not just games. And I said this at the time when I turned down that contract in 2018. People were like, "Why do you care so much about these students sending you this contract?" And I was saying to them, 5-10 years from now, these are the idiots that are going to be running our country.
And they are.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on the Eric Metaxas Show.
It doesn't seem to me, when you read the Federalist Papers and the Constitution, that it's possible that the founders could have foreseen anything along the lines of big tech in America. The power that is in these few companies, clearly our Congress doesn't know what to do about it. They don't have any clue that the free market is not an idol to be worshipped. It's a part of a larger freedom. And so here we are.
I don't think the founders could have envisioned it, but they had correctives for it, which is why we need to, really rise up peacefully and use the First Amendment of the Constitution to fight back. If we weren't in quote unquote lockdown, we could assemble in our town halls, in our churches, in our synagogues and mosques and talk to each other. But lockdown prevents us from using our First Amendment and Fourth Amendment rights, and that's intentional. So all of our speech is forced onto these social media platforms. And then to just finish the kind of evil circle, big tech has been purging conservative voices, which I discussed with Tucker Carlson a few nights ago. And big tech is also an embrace with my team, the Democrats. But what's going to happen is a closed circle of all speech being, cleansed of conservative voices. And then there's another, influencer, which is, very dark, which is China. A lot of thoughtful people with whom I'm in touch who are in the world of statecraft and analysis are very concerned that China is also exploiting, our vulnerability to weaken us. Look at what's happening to our country. We're not learning our history. Our history is under attack.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt in the ReliefFactor.com studio. Let me early on tell you should be trying ReliefFactor.com. You really should be using it. If I normally do it in the next segment, but I want to do all my talking in the next segment with Archbishop Chaput about Archbishop Chaput's book, Things Worth Dying For. So let me remind you about Relief Factor. Now, don't leave home without taking it. Tens of thousands you've already enrolled. I take it every morning in the first hour, and mind you, in hours 2 and 3. So join me in becoming healthy. Join me in moving. And if moving right now is a problem for you because you've got arthritis, you've got aches and pains, muscles don't work so well, and you're trying to advance during the shutdown, your exercise program, ReliefFactor.com will help you. Kieran Kirkman, Resveratrol and Omega, go and get it. $19.95 gets you started. Let me check what's going on overseas because there's a hedge fund that failed yesterday. It's brought to you by AndrewandTodd.com. Andrew and Todd are your home bankers. They lend you money to buy a house. They lend you money to refinance your house. They get money out of your house. Whatever you need to do with house finance. And the tax bill will change that. And that will determine a lot of how you manage your biggest asset, which is your home. And be ready. Get in touch with Andrew and Todd right now. I think it's going to mean get as much money out of your house as possible, move it to assets to your children as soon as possible, rather than having it confiscated at your death in the OK Boomer tax bill that Democrats are pushing, confiscatory. But you're going to want to know what you can do. And the people to do that with, get the money out of your house now, are AndrewandTodd.com, 888-888-1172. Overseas, Japan went down 2%. But England and Germany are up a little bit. They are shrugging off the hedge fund failure, although a number of banks like Credit Suisse and Nomura and other banks are getting slammed. They had money parked in the hedge fund that collapsed called Archegos Capital. They had to make capital calls last week, and their earnings, Nomura and Credit Suisse said their earnings might take significant hit after a client of their brokerage service defaulted on margin calls last week. That means hedge funds are great until they collapse. I don't invest in hedge funds because I haven't got money to lose by people who are magicians and pretend to know. Mutual funds are smart. Mutual funds are run publicly, transparently, and you know who's running them, and you can look up their past performance, which is no guarantee of future success. But I can guarantee you the best home rate available with AndrewandTodd.com. So that market in the United States has already absorbed that hit, but in Europe they're up and down in a little different places. In Japan they did not like that at all. Nomura shaking up the Japanese market today. Finally, let me talk to you about food for the poor. It's Lent. A lot of you haven't done anything because COVID kind of erased Ash Wednesday. It's erased a lot of regular church services for people, especially who are older, who have underlying medical conditions. They just haven't been going. Most of Catholics in America received a dispensation from attending Mass if they were over 60 or if they had an underlying health condition. And so a lot of people just have not done the traditional Lenten ritual of self-sacrifice and mortification and anything. Joe Biden said he gave up sweets. That's a Catholic thing. But some Protestants do it as well. If you haven't done anything and you want to make up for that, go over to Food for the Poor. The banner is at the top of HughHewitt.com, and do involve yourself. The suffering is immense in Central America. It's immense. Malnutrition is immense. Just call, if you can today, 855-359-HOPE. 855-359-HOPE. Or go to HughHewitt.com and hit the Food for the Poor banner at the top. I'll be back with the Archbishop after this.
Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
We have to do a better job of convincing the other side how wrong the policies are of the left. They've destroyed the family, destroyed jobs with things like minimum wages. We need to make the better argument. The fact that the majority of people, including the majority of Republicans, Michael, believe in a minimum wage blows my mind. We can't even convince Republicans how stupid that is. How are we going to convince Democrats? We need to make better arguments, because I don't believe people are stupid, Michael. I believe that the captain on the Titanic, had he known about the iceberg, would have taken evasive action. We need to take evasive action, and we need to make better arguments to our friends on the left. I gave a speech once, and often when I give a speech, the audience is predominantly white, even though there's no entry fee. So I'm giving a speech, and there's a man standing in the back, a large black man. He's got his arms folded, Michael. He got a frown on his face. I don't think he was part of the security detail. He looked unhappy with the crap I was saying. So I give my speech. The man comes up to me, and he says, "Larry, I got to tell you, I am angry." And I thought he was going to say, you said this, you undermined black people, you did this. He said, "I had no idea that there were more unarmed whites killed every year than unarmed blacks. I had no idea that young black teenagers were more likely to get a job than a white teenager before the minimum wage kicked in. I had no idea." And he rattled off all the kinds of things that I said. He had no idea that the black family, the out-of-wedlock birth rate had tripled from 1965. No idea. He said, "I am angry at myself for being so foolish, for listening to left-wing sources, for not broadening my base, for not knowing more. I'm angry at myself," he told me. Now, if I can do that with that guy, we can do that with the whole country if we make good arguments.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Dennis Prager Show.
The people at the border themselves are saying it is because you are welcoming people and said America is essentially open and we will give you whatever you need, health care and education and so on, that millions upon millions of people are entering or will enter the country. Why did you stop if you are against this immigration, is illegal immigration, why did you stop the building of the wall? Just a few things have come to mind that might be asked. Can you imagine if this were a Donald Trump press conference, of course, and there were a major Republican governor mired in the scandals of Andrew Cuomo? Financial, moral, health, and sexual harassment scandals? Not a word about that. I mean, I don't care personally whether Joe Biden asks that Andrew Cuomo resign or not is on a list of 100 things that I'm concerned about, number 100. So, nevertheless, it would have been a preoccupation at a press conference. They were yelling. Remember, they just yell at his press conferences. This was like a cheerleading group. You know how many questions there were about the filibuster to egg him on to support a way of getting rid of the filibuster? I'm surprised he wasn't asked about D.C. as a state.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today. Trending now on The Mike Gallagher Show.
In fact, I've got a theory. As the Biden administration is now looking at housing migrants at military bases, as the Biden administration is spending millions and millions of taxpayer dollars on motel rooms, brand names, by the way. This isn't just your dude drop in. I'm sure this is the good stuff. ICE has signed a deal worth $89.6 million with a Texas nonprofit to shelter migrants in hotel rooms as the feds process a massive backlog of new arrivals at the border. This deal was announced the other day as illegals are arriving at the border at a rate we haven't seen in decades. ICE has signed a short-term contract with the nonprofit division of Endeavors to provide temporary shelter and processing services for families who have not been expelled and are therefore placed in immigration proceedings for their removal from the United States. The $86.9 million contract provides 1,239 beds
Welcome back, America. Hugh Hewitt, joined by my friend Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia. Hello, Archbishop. How are you?
I am just fine, Hugh. How are you this morning?
Well, I'm troubled. In our many conversations over the years, I've reconciled with the fact you're a Steelers fan, an Eagles fan, a Broncos fan. But until I read your new book, Things Worth Dying For, I did not know you had a Detroit connection. You're actually in the... I did not know the Michigan stuff until this, so I want to get that out of the way for people. We started high. Let's go low. Right. You go back to a Governor General of Detroit. You're partially responsible then for Detroit being in the Union. We could have left that with Canada.
I imagine so, but I didn't have anything personally to do with that. I was just blessed with good ancestors.
I was fascinated actually by your family history and the point that you make about why we love it. Give people a little sense of the name Chaput and where it comes from and how far. I had no idea. I had you pegged as the Potawatomi Indian, the tribe member, first Native American Archbishop, all that stuff. Didn't know about Henry the 13th.
Actually, it was Louis the Ninth. He
Louis the
was a saint. He was a saint in the Catholic Church. On my mother's side, we have an ancestry that goes back into France very clearly. But one of my ancestors was Robert Navarre, who was the Governor General of Detroit. And one of his sons, I guess, became a fur trader and traveled down to Indiana, what is now Indiana, where he met my great, 6 times back grandmother, who was a Potawatomi Indian. Her name was Angelique Ketchkaway. And their family eventually was removed from Indiana, ended up in Kansas, and that's where my French-Canadian grandfather met his wife, and my mother was born, and that's my connection.
That's why I like that chapter a lot. In fact, at dinner last night with Bud the contractor, I was recounting your genealogy and preparing for this interview. And I said to him, I think older people, and I'm included among this, love genealogy because it reminds us that we have long paths and we have long futures in the form of our children and our descendants and our collateral descendants and the world. So if you look backwards, you're actually looking forwards. And that's why you recounted it, including whether or not you're related to St. Louis. I don't know, but you don't know. But it's fun to think about. And people are now focused on it. And it's important. I tell my law students, Archbishop, on the first day of class, You didn't get here. You're in a law classroom, and there are two stories, the stories of your country and the stories of your family. And we talk about that because everybody gets here by a long line.
Yes, I think it's important to mention our country too, because our country is our ancestors on another level. And if we don't know that ancestry, our country's in trouble, just like our family's in trouble if we don't know our ancestors biologically.
Now, Archbishop, that brings us to the book. This is the third in a trilogy. And I'm holding up my very well-thumbed copy of Things Worth Dying For. My 4-page outline, last night it was 5 pages. I got it down to 4, so we're going to take a long time talking about this. But Things Worth Dying For, I described it on Twitter as a summing up. Is that fair?
In some sense it is. I imagine I have some life left, so there are some more things to go on, but it's in some way, people ask me, when did I begin to write the book? And in terms of the book itself, probably 2 years ago already. But in terms of the overall picture that's involved in the book, a lifetime, 76 years now. I think all of us who write and give talks like you do, base that on a lot of material that we're not even conscious of. That's been part of our life through the years.
Your library must be immense, and I don't know what you're going to do with it. I don't know what I'm going to do with mine, but I read in Things Worth Dying For a lot of authors that I do not know very well, like Roger Scruton. I just don't know anything about him. I've seen him read and referenced. You rely heavily on him. For example, let's take a diversion, as I often will in this. Tell us about him and why you love him so much.
Well, Roger Scruton died last year, I believe, in 2020. Right. And he was British, of course, and reflected on history and culture and philosophy in a way that was popularized by some of the television shows that he did. And I find him fascinating because I think he presents in language that's easy to understand. And visuals, when it comes to his videos, very important parts of what it means to be a human being. You know, he's in a very contemporary way immersed in what we call the transcendentals, beauty, truth, and goodness. And those are the three things that make life worth living, you know, things that are true and beautiful and good. And if we dedicate ourselves to embracing a life that involves those three characteristics, we're going to be very, very happy human beings. If we don't, we're going to be unhappy. In terms of my library, I gave it away already when I moved into retirement. I gave most of my books to the seminary here in Philadelphia. I have reference books, of course, I brought with me, but I've moved to a Kindle in terms of reading, so I'm not collecting books in the present like I collected books in the past.
You know, I'm glad someone wanted them. I have to read a hard copy. I have to annotate it. I have to make notes in the margins so I can go back and do an outline. So when I give them away, some people don't like them. Things Worth Dying For is in demand. People always want my books because they're free when I'm done with them. And I'll find a good Catholic friend to give Things Worth Dying For. But I want to stay on Scruton for a second. When I went back, a good book leads you to other authors. And so I went and read up on him. He went to Jesus College in Cambridge, and then he taught at the University of London. And his life was one great struggle with the current culture. And so I found that very interesting. And given the previous books you wrote, Strangers in a Strange Land, Render Unto Theater, and now Things Worth Dying For, this is a book very much about fighting for what you believe in and for what Catholic Christians believe in specifically. You are not at all tremulous in urging people to witness their faith.
Well, you know, one of the things that is considered a negative factor is refer to somebody today, to refer to somebody as a culture warrior. But people talk about me that way, and I've never actually understood why it's an insult. They mean it. When they call me that, they mean it as an insult. But I think that anybody who lives life seriously is in some ways someone who's fighting for important principles upon which to build life. And culture is the combination of all the things that make up our lives. So we should all be culture warriors. Moms and dads are culture warriors when it comes to their children. You know, so it's a very positive thing and nothing to be ashamed of. And, you know, again, fighting is not a popular thing to talk about these days, or a warrior culture, because, you know, military life and activity isn't considered in the same kind of way it used to be even 40 years ago. But I think I don't believe in violence. I think it's contrary to the gospel of Jesus Christ. unless it's violence in the service of the good, the true, and the beautiful. But we still have to be willing to fight for things.
And I want to make sure in every segment that we do, I pronounce the key finding in the book. And I want to do it from page 21. Jesus of Nazareth really did live. It's Holy Week. It's important to say this. Archbishop Chaput says, Jesus of Nazareth really did live. He really was the Christos, the anointed one, the Messiah. He really did suffer and die and rise for us. And the proof is the fire he left in the hearts of those who knew him, a passion that reworked the course of the world. It is Holy Week. Unless people accept that premise, things worth dying for will not make a lick of sense to them.
I don't think so. I hope it's very much based on Jesus and the scriptures. Of course, a lot of it's based on the Old Testament, as you know, the Jewish scriptures, because we who are Christians consider the Jewish people our elder brothers and sisters, and we stand on their shoulders. But that's the foundation of my life and the life of people from whom I came, and I'm grateful for that gift.
I'm grateful that you made it very explicit. I want to play for you the clip. In 30 years of radio, I tell people this is the most astonishing exchange I had. And It's with Richard Dawkins, the anti-belief expert in Great Britain. And we're talking, and here's what he says.
Okay, do you believe Jesus turned water into wine?
Yes.
You seriously do?
Yes.
You actually think that Jesus got water and made all those molecules turn into wine?
Yes.
My God.
Yes.
Okay.
My God, actually, not yours.
So, Archbishop, he kind of he summed up the attitude that you talk about in Things Worth Dying For. We are living in a culture that is increasingly, it's not just postmodern, it's not just post-Christian, it's hostile to Christianity.
It's hostile to Christianity for a lot of reasons. I think primarily because Christianity, if lived faithfully, challenges a lot of the givens of our culture that the culture is very attached to. For example, human life and marriage as we understand it as Christians is not respected very much in the culture of the United States today. Abortion is accepted in a common kind of way, and the meaning of marriage, of course, has been changed very much and even dismissed. People aren't marrying like they used to. They're not having children at all like they used to. And lived Christianity challenges those kind of basic things of life, the meaning of life itself and the meaning of family, the two things that are at the heart of who we are as individuals and as communities. And because of that, the church is under attack all the time in very unjust ways by people who don't really understand the church.
When we come back, I'm going to talk at length about the Philadelphia lawsuit, but I do want people to know, I haven't even begun to go through the book yet. Family is at its center. And I don't know if you organized your chapters. You put the World Family Conference that you oversaw in Philadelphia right at the center of your book, Things Worth Dying For, sort of a capstone of your ecclesiastical career. And it did what it was intended to do. It elevated family as a key part of Christian life. Is that the thing of which you are proudest, Archbishop, of your work?
It certainly was an extraordinary event, and I'm deeply grateful to the people of Philadelphia who made it even possible. It cost a lot of money at a time when we were really broke as a church, and it took hours and hours and hours of thousands of people putting it all together. And of course, we're grateful to the Pope and the people in Rome for making Philadelphia the center of this gathering, and I'm happy that Pope Francis came for it. Would it be the most important thing I've done in life? I don't think so. I think that baptizing a baby is more important than any of that. And witnessing a Christian marriage is more important than any of that. Forgiving someone's sins and confession is more important than any of that. All those things, who's going to remember the world meeting of families in a few years, but they'll remember the baptism of their child and the marriage of their spouse.
Okay, I'll pick up on that because it was a big public witness of faith in the United States. That's why I liked it. It was 800,000 people. Is that how many people turned out on the day that you and Francis went through town?
At least that many. I was blessed to ride along on the Pope-mobile and see all of them, and they were really an incredible crowd.
Well, what it sent to me, what it should have said to the entire United States is do not underestimate the deposit of faith in the United States. And I think it's much bigger than DC culture and elite culture. One of the themes of Things Worth Dying For is that elite culture has to be resisted. Is that a fair statement, Archbishop?
I certainly agree with you 100%. I think that elite culture is the most worrisome part of the culture of our time.
And why is that?
Because it's arrogant, and because it is in the process of trying to lead our country in the wrong direction in so many ways. It's the greatest threat to our country from the right or from the left. I've been absolutely convinced throughout my life that it's from the left. Back when I was a younger man, before I became a priest, even when I first became a priest, I would have been much more sympathetic with the liberal side of things. But as time's gone on, I've seen that has led and continues to lead people in the wrong direction, both in terms of personal development, but also in terms of the basic values of our country.
When we come back, I'll continue to talk with Archbishop Chaput about his brand new book, Things Worth Dying For. Go to Amazon.com, get it right now, give it to everyone you know, and we'll talk about it when we return. It is The Hugh Hewitt Show.
This is Jerry Boyer of Town Hall Finance for townhall.com. The Congressional Budget Office just released its new debt figures. The national debt this year will top 102% of GDP. This has only happened twice before, both during World War II. This number does not count the proposed $1.9 trillion stimulus bill, nor does it count the money which was borrowed from Social Security, since that's considered intergovernmental debt. Debt levels this high break the intergenerational covenant that we have with our children and grandchildren. FDR borrowed to defeat the Nazis and Imperial Japan. Money well spent. Reagan borrowed to defeat the Soviet Union. That was also money well spent. These great projects made the world better for future generations. But our political class is not buying victories against international threats. They are buying political victories for incumbents. This is nothing more than fiscal abuse, and our kids will pay the price. It needs to stop, now. I'm Jerry Boyer.
The Pepperdine School of Public Policy, America's unique graduate program for leaders. Learn more at publicpolicy.pepperdine.edu. Trending now on The Larry Elder Show.
Studio. Of course, nobody brought up during the press conference that polls show that Americans want voter ID, including black Americans. Yet your party trashes voter ID as voter suppression. Can you please explain how it is that black people want something that you call voter suppression? That didn't come up. Nor did the stunt that Tammy Duckworth and Macy Hirono tried to pull come up. Two Asian American senators, Democrats. A couple days ago, they told Biden that they weren't going to confirm any more new nominees until and unless he appoints an Asian American to a high-level position. Mr. President, what is your reaction to being pressured to put someone in your administration based on skin color, as opposed to performance, as opposed to your comfort level with him or her, as opposed to background? Is this the direction we should be taking America, Mr. President? When you said you wanted a cabinet that looked like America, you're implying that unless the cabinet is racially reflective of the country, then it's an invalid cabinet, invalid administration. Is that what you're telling us? Should we do that with the NBA, Mr. President? Should we do that with doctors? Should we do that with people who design bridges? Airline pilots? Should we hire based upon racial diversity and proportionality as opposed to competence? I'm asking.
Keep up with what's trending. Subscribe on YouTube today.
Welcome back, America. In modern America, there are four great Catholic intellectuals: Robert George of Princeton, Ryan Anderson of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, George Weigel of the same, and Archbishop Charles Chaput, who is my guest. And of those four great Catholic intellectuals, I talk to the Archbishop the most because he's normal and I understand him. You wrote your book to be understood, Archbishop, and I did at the end of it, I do what I normally do when a book of popular philosophy is in front of me in popular history. What were you aiming at? What impression did I take away? And my notes at the beginning: general thought, the Archbishop is content. The Archbishop is not disappointed. The Archbishop is concerned, but he is not gloomy. He knows the immense work to be done, but it's been done again and again. How do you like my summary of what your book left me with?
Well, I hope all those things are true. I don't know if I'm one of those top intellectuals, and you forgot to add yourself to that group. You were very proud.
I'm a talk show.
We're proud that you're an intellectual, though. You're a conservative intellectual, and even though you are an unusual kind of Catholic, since you're a Presbyterian Catholic, you're a very good Catholic, and we're very, very grateful to God for that, and proud of you.
Thank you.
I am a bit more disappointed about the way life has gone than the book would indicate, I think. I'm worried very much about the future of our country and the future of our Catholic Church and Christianity in general, of course. I'm a person of hope. One of your guests this week talked about hope not being a good strategy. Well, I think it's a necessary strategy for people who are believers, because we trust that God's going to bring all this to a good conclusion in the end, even though we have a lot of indications it's not going in the right direction. So I hope that the book does encourage people to recommit themselves. And in order to recommit yourself, you have to have some kind of hope, whether that's in a marriage or in the job or whatever. Hope is kind of a fundamental strategy for living life to its fullness, which I hope
gets Christian across the river.
That's
Pilgrim's
true.
Progress is a book that has eluded me forever. I've started it 25 times, Archbishop. I've never finished it. The language is just not. C.S. Lewis, I love the Lewis. I'll read Chesterton. I'll read Tolkien endlessly. Pilgrim's Progress, I'm glad you summarized it because I've never finished it. But you have Christian the Pilgrim on the gates of heaven. He has to get across the river, and his last friend is hope.
That's right. And I think that's necessary for all of us. Even when we're on our deathbed, I think we have to hope that things are going to end up all right at that passage from this life to the next one. By the way, I share your difficulty with Pilgrim's Progress. It is a difficult book for modern people to read because of its style, but a lot of the classics are. I tried to reread. Which one was it? Count of Monte Cristo last year, and found it very, very difficult to read, even though I loved it when I was a young kid and I read it.
Yeah.
My taste in books has changed.
Well, you are a lover of history as I am, and I think that comes through. But you also read a lot more church history than I do. And before we go to break, and we'll come back next hour, what is the emphasis on church history? Why do you think that's so important for even laymen to know?
Well, we need to know that the church, we Catholics have a unique understanding of the church in the Christian community. I don't know if many Protestants refer to the church as Holy Mother, the Church. People see the church as a community of believers, important to their lives. But for Catholics, the church has an identity apart from a particular time and place, that she really is our mother from whom we receive life. And because of that, it's important to know the history of your family, your mother. And we've had difficult times in the church in recent years, the sexual abuse scandal, for example. But if we understand church history, you see that the church has recovered from horrible kinds of experiences like that in the course of history. In some ways, the worst being the Protestant Reformation, where the church was deeply divided and remains divided because of that. So reading history helps you not to repeat it if it's bad history, and also to have some kind of hope and consolation if things aren't going really smoothly. And we learn from people who are smarter than us. People in the past are sometimes smarter than we are.
The lowest point of the book, but it's not the low point of your life, is going to the synods, 3 of them. The first one good, the second 2 not so good. And you remarked that you were scandalized at the conduct of the synod. And I want people to understand that's not exactly new in the Catholic Church, right? Machiavellian politics in the church go back a long time.
Yes, but people like myself don't expect that to be the case. So I mean, I really do have an idealized expectation around church, and especially the church at the highest echelons. And having become a bishop, I've seen that expectation is not ever met, and that sometimes the things we idealize are just as incompetent as we are ourselves. And it really was, as you say, Machiavellian, my experience at the two most recent synods that I attended.
When we come back, stay tuned, America. When I talk at length with the Archbishop, we're going to be talking about death and dying, thoughts at the end of a career, as you've got 10, 20, 30 years left of life. The road ahead is a lot shorter than the road behind. Archbishop Chaput does it all in this book, Things Worth Dying For, which I strongly recommend to all of you on this Holy Week. The reading that you might want to do if you didn't do anything during Lent, right here, Things Worth Dying For. Stay tuned.